Today we are pleased to welcome Major General Doug Chalmers. He's the Deputy Commander for Strategy and Sustainment at the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, briefing us today from Southwest Asia. Major General Chalmers will make a few opening questions and then take comments, and then take your questions. We'll have about 30 minutes for this briefing, a little shorter than I know what you're used to with Steve. We'll call on you for questions while you're able to see him. He may not be able to see you, so we'll be sure to state your name and outlet as we call on you. Without any further ado, General Chalmers, we'll pass it off to you for opening remarks.
Jeff, thank you. Good morning. My name is Major General Doug Chalmers, and I'm currently serving as one of the two Deputy Commanders of the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve. I deployed here to the Middle East with the staff of the US 3rd Armored Corps from Fort Hood, Texas, back in September. And I've been serving as one of the CJTF Deputy Commanders for about the last 6 months. Some of you by now would have recognized that my accent means that I'm not actually originally from Texas. I'm on an exchange tour from the British Army with the US 3rd Corps, and so after our deployment, I'll return back to Fort Hood with the Corps to complete my secondment to the Corps headquarters. I've got some prepared remarks for you today, and then I'll gladly take your questions in the time that we have. First and foremost, on behalf of the entire CJTF, I'd like to extend our thoughts and prayers to the people of Brussels and all of those impacted by the cowardly terror attacks here in Baghdad over the last couple of weeks. Attacks like these remind us of the importance of our mission. We remain steadfast in our resolve to defeat Daesh. Daesh's violent extremist ideology and ambition to expand must be stopped. As you know, the mission of the Combined Joint Task Force is to defeat Daesh in both Iraq and Syria by synchronizing combat operations and supporting effects with our partners in both Iraq and Syria. Every day, our partners, enabled by the CJTF, are achieving visible effects against Daesh. This is a tough fight. However, it is one that is necessary and one which I'm confident that we, as a coalition, will win. Our strategy to defeat Daesh has not changed. We continue attacking the enemy with strikes across the breadth and depth of their so-called caliphate to weaken them, whilst we enhance the lethality of our partner forces on the ground in both countries through close coordination of our fires with their movement. Concurrently, we work with our partners to better prepare them for the type of fighting that they are experiencing by enhancing their training, equipping, and through our advice. Leveraging the unique capabilities of the different nations of the coalition that are directly contributing to the military campaign here gives us real strength as a mission of many nations in achieving these tasks. One of my roles as a Deputy Commander is to ensure that the Iraqi security forces have the necessary forces and right equipment to defeat Daesh. Now, this can range with meetings with senior Iraqi officers to discuss their current and future force generation requirements, down to coordinating with our own logisticians to ensure that the ammunition and vehicles are resourced and delivered to the right Iraqi bases. To date, as you know, we've trained nearly 20,000 Iraqi security forces, many of which have already participated in the fight, such as the successful liberation of Ramadi. And today, many of those forces are committed to the counterattack operations that are ongoing either in the Euphrates River Valley or up in the Tigris River Valley. This training includes both army and police, and it's the police units which will enable the government of Iraq to hold the ground once it has been liberated from Daesh. While the Iraqi security forces continue to conduct shaping operations in preparation for the isolation of Mosul, we, the coalition, continue to put pressure on Daesh inside the city through strikes against all facets of their operations. This includes their headquarters, finances, weapons manufacturing sites, and propaganda sites. All of this, when synchronized with the operations on the ground in both Iraq and Syria by the Iraqis and our Syrian Democratic Forces and other opposition forces, are isolating Mosul from Raqqa and will make it harder for Daesh to freely move and resupply all reinforcements between those two cities. We firmly believe that momentum is now on our side, and we will do all that we can to enhance counter-Daesh operations where we can. We are working closely with the Iraqi security forces to identify opportunities such as specialized training for things like river crossings with mobile bridges, police training, logistics support, and the provision of fire support. But I'll reiterate what has been said by many of the briefers before you, and indeed senior leaders. All of these capabilities are in support of and in coordination with the government of Iraq. Ultimately, these capabilities are agreed upon and approved by the Iraqis. The resolve of the coalition continues to grow as we all share the same objective of defeating Daesh in Iraq and Syria. And the importance of that objective has only become clearer in the time that I've served here in the CJTF. As a deputy commander, I interact on a frequent basis with all our contributing nations, reviewing both their current and future personnel and capability assignments, equipment donations, and contributions to the overall effort. The contributing nations of the coalition are deeply invested and across the spectrum of our efforts, and will continue to support the building of our partners in both Iraq and Syria as their capacity to defeat this enemy continues. My very last parting comment before I take your questions is I'd like to take a few seconds to inform you of our new CJTF OIR website. After much hard work, we are happy to announce our website is now operational and active at www.inherentresolve.mil. Inherent Resolve being all one word. A big thanks to all of the people who made this a reality, from the Defence Media Advisory Activity Group to CENTCOM. Our site is collaborative with the new global counter-ISIL site, globalcoalition.org. And we'll continue to improve the website as we go along with the intent of giving you a better insight as to what the contributing nations and our partners are doing on a daily basis. I understand the standard routine is that the Associated Press traditionally gets the first question. So back over to you in Washington.
That would be Lita Baldor. Lita.
Hi, General. It's Lita Baldor with AP. Thanks for doing this. On the Iraq operations, General Dunford the other day said that we should expect to see additional U.S. forces going to Iraq in the coming weeks. First, do you have any sense how many more? And do you have any thoughts at this point about where they may go? Are they likely to go up in the north where they can help with the Mosul shaping operations? And are they likely to include either more movements by Marines with the Iraqi forces? Thank you.
No, thank you for that question. And I saw the comments by the chairman the other day. As you'd expect for us as a headquarters, we have been working very much with our Iraqi partners as they've expanded their operations and gone into the counterattack. And we've effectively, through that planning, worked up what could be described as a menu of capabilities to continue to enable or enhance them as their operations have expanded. In terms of exactly when from that menu we'll see movements for, I'm not measuring it necessarily in terms of weeks. I know we're waiting for some decisions to be made, both outside of here and back in Iraq itself. In terms of the where, it very much, as I say, works with our Iraqis as they've expanded their operations both in Anbar and up into Nineveh province. That will come as their plan confirms where the additional enablement by us is required. And I would just put one part just to sort of add a piece to your question there. You mentioned movement at the end. Everything I've described there is to continue really to enable and expand our support to our Iraqi partners in that way. So we're not looking at changing what you've seen us do so far. We're going to work in support of our Iraqi partners, particularly in the provision of advice and fire, but not actually move with them, as you might have just mentioned by accident there. Hopefully that answers the question, but I'll take a follow-up if you want me to.
Yes, on the Marines, I think that was the part of the question. I'm wondering if we'll see more fires by the Marines in support of the Iraqis as they advance, and will you beef up that type of support?
That's one of the aspects inside the menu, and very much as you'll have seen, you know, the Marines were put in there with the artillery in order to provide either self-defense fires or supporting fires as they were advancing. And as they have been advancing, you'll be aware that those US Marines with those guns have been supporting our Iraqi partners. And doing more of that, and we've been doing a similar type of activity down in Anbar with Army artillery units as well in support of our Iraqi partners there. And expanding that sort of capability is on the menu, but I'm not sure exactly who it might provide. It may even be other coalition members as well.
Okay. Next to Barbara Starr from CNN.
General, being as you are from Texas, at least temporarily, I would add, I'm sure you're aware of the conversation across the United States about what the military is doing in the counter-ISIL campaign, and a lot of suggestions from national level figures about what they think needs to be done. Because you talk to the coalition members so often, I wanted to ask you two things. Do you hear anything from do you hear anything from any coalition members about the notion that one hears in the United States on a national level that using nuclear weapons against ISIS should be on the table? Does anybody in the coalition you've ever talked to think that's a good idea?
No, that's right. That's a conversation up front I've never heard discussed amongst any of our coalition members at any stage. Actually, I have to admit that one's taken me completely by surprise. The simple answer to that is no.
I could ask you another follow-up. Here in the United States, from national level figures, or at least one of them, there has been a discussion that troops these days are afraid to fight, those are the words used, that they're afraid to fight because they're worried about the Geneva Convention implications of their actions. On a level of the working military out there fighting ISIL, have you ever heard that anybody's afraid to fight because they could be held accountable under the Geneva Conventions? And I suppose that applies to your own government as well, your own British troops. Are they afraid to fight because of the Geneva Convention? That is something that's been brought up here.
No, I've seen over the last couple of years similar sort of articles sort of raising that as a question. As an infantry officer who's been involved in sort of combat over pretty much the last decade, all the troops I've had the privilege of commanding very much understand the underpinning context of Geneva Convention, the reason that it is established, and I've never heard of soldiers afraid to fight because of Geneva Convention in that regard. We regard it very much as a sense of basic principles which guide our behavior in battle and very much enable us to deal with which is a very unusual human experience. And to live within those rules, I think, is good for both our soldiers and indeed the very population that we fight on behalf of.
Next is, I believe it's John.
John, that's right. Yeah. Yes. John Hines, One American News. And I just wanted to follow up on there was a bit of a controversy surrounding the British in Basra, and there was a withdrawal there and a reluctance of forces to support the Charge of the Knights. And I wondered if the British military is feeling a sense of needing to redeem itself at this point.
I did serve in Basra, but not at that period of time. I don't think the British military, and I speak here now, I remember that, I remember it's a story, it's something that has come up in discussion over in times and the lessons that we've learned from it, but that was quite some time ago, and I think for most of our military now who've served multiple tours in Afghanistan since, there is absolutely I definitely feel no sense to redeem myself. I'm a professional military soldier, and I think the reputation for the British Army still stands strong in that regard.
Okay, great. Next to Courtney from NBC News.
Hi, General. Going back to Lolita's first question, we've asked several times in the past weeks about the shaping operations in Mosul. What is the most up-to-date, the most recent estimate for how many Iraqi troops it will take to actually begin the offensive operations, not the shaping operations, but to actually begin the operations in Mosul? And what's the most up-to-date estimate for when those troops will be prepared to begin that? And then I have a question on Syria afterwards, please.
On the Mosul question, and you're going to think I've been slightly evasive, and I don't mean to be, but you'll be alive to the fact that the details of such sort of operational planning, and we work with our Iraqi partners on that on a regular basis, it is definitely one of those areas that they are retaining operational security of. You rightly touched that the isolation of Mosul has very much moved on, with the Iraqi army now operations starting. And we've talked about the US Marine Corps artillery that's in support of those operations. But the next steps after that, for good, sound sort of military security reasons, the Iraqis are looking to sort of keep discreet at this time. But I work very hard trying to understand their plans in order to ensure that we can properly sustain and support their scheme of manoeuvre as it develops. I know that's slightly evasive, but you'll understand that military planning, particularly for something of this complexity, is something that they're keen to keep reasonably tight control of.
And then if I could ask you one question on Syria, I'm not sure if this falls completely in your lane or not, but on the Russian activity in Syria, can you give us an update on what you're seeing? We know there were reports that they took out about 20 aircraft about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Are you seeing oh, did he lose me?
Nope, still there.
Okay, good. I can be louder if that helps.
Hear a word of that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll start over. It's Courtney QB from NBC News still. On Syria, could you give us a sense of what you're seeing about Russian activity in Syria? There were reports.
Hey. I'm really sorry. I didn't hear a word of the question. I apologize.
3, 2, 1. Can you hear us, General?
Can you hear me now, General?
General, we're testing again. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Right, that sounds better. I could hear someone there.
For a question about Russia, Syria.
Thank you. I don't know if I should use this or.
You keep it for us. Well, yeah, try without.
Okay. Hi, General. So on Russian presence in Syria, can you give us a sense of what you're seeing there? There were reports a couple weeks ago that the Russians took about 20 aircraft out. Have they moved any more aircraft out since then? I think it was March 17th. And what kind of operations are you still seeing them conduct in Syria? Is it helicopters, fixed wing? What sort of strikes are they taking?
Good question. I'll apologise for not being able to hear earlier on. I've been slightly late with my response back to you. I think what we saw at the cessation of violence after the announcement was a number of Russian aircraft, as you've described, withdraw. They've retained a presence inside of the country, and they are still supporting the regime in some of those operations that are being conducted. What we have seen a change of since the cessation of violence, and you've seen this in open source, is that their operations now are mostly focused against advances towards Daesh-held areas, Palmyra being the most recent objective. And they're supporting the regime through a number of range, and you've described some of them yourself there from our observation of what we've seen so far. And that's probably about the best picture that I've got at the moment. As you know, we don't do detailed coordination with the ground elements on that side with the regime.
Richard Sisk.
Hi, General. Thanks for doing this. In the way of sustainment, can you give us any sense, any idea of the scope of the coalition effort in supplying equipment to the ISF? Do you have any figures on that? How much?
That's a very good question, and I don't have the figures directly to hand, but actually you would be able to find them fairly easy to hand. We use the Iraqi Train and Equip Fund, which has procured, as you know, a lot of equipment sets and has also provided us the freedom in order sometimes to increase things like training sites to enable the trainees to sort of operate through. Those figures are held. They're public out there. I can't remember exactly what the figure is. It was 1 point something, but I wouldn't like to billion-wise that was used through. But that work has gone on through, and over time we've used that fund, particularly focused on the counter-attack brigades, to sort of equip them and train them and re-equip them to move forward. And as they've deployed forward, and then I've actually got someone highlighting some detail now. I think the original tranche of ITEF was 1.6 billion. And that allowed us to sort of roll out the first series of counter-offensive brigades, and there have been subsequent tranches added to that. And those subsequent tranches we're very much using to do extra niche bits of battle damage replacement, vehicles that have been lost in combat, and then sustainment either through spare parts or ammunition to sustain those units in what is quite a high-intensity fighting at the moment, therefore is outstripping what is their routinely budgeted for costs. What we're also doing, though, is working with the local police forces, and this is an area where other nations' donations have proven extremely useful. Things like body armor for the police and some of the non-standard ammunition for things like the AK-47, etc., which have also received quite a lot of donations from a number of countries who have helped us meet that demand.
If I could follow, General, please. In the way of the setting the conditions for the shaping operations up around Mosul, is there thought to delivering more to the ISF, to the Peshmerga, in the way of AT-4s or perhaps Milans?
I think what we have done is I've been in a number of these meetings where the Iraqis have and the Peshmerga very much gone through their experiences of fighting Daesh over the period of time and worked out and identified what works and what can be improved. And as they go through that, we tune our training, and as you've described, we tune some of the equipments that we provide. We get a better idea of what they use in higher ratios than not. And some of the items you've mentioned there are the sort of bits on the list. Along with that also clearly is a lot of engineering equipment, given the level of the improvised explosive devices that Daesh are using very much as obstacles to try and limit the advance of some of our partners.
Okay, next to Lucas Tomlinson with Fox News.
Thank you, General. Just a follow-up to Courtney's question. Have the Russians put in more equipment to Syria than they have taken out?
No, not that I've seen. All I've seen is the withdrawal of the aircraft. There was equipment in there. You know, they've had equipment in there for many years. Some of that was withdrawn, some of that was returned. What I've seen is a withdrawal of aircraft, but I haven't seen, as you've just described there, the reverse flow as inferred.
But overall, General, are you seeing a Russian pullout of Syria?
No, I've seen a partial withdrawal of some capabilities, is how I'd describe it.
Seeing the Russian forces overall pulling out?
No, I think there might have been a crossover there. I think I wouldn't describe it as that. I'd describe it as a partial withdrawal of some capabilities.
And then going over to Iraq, are you seeing any Iranian-backed forces in and around Mosul?
No, we're not.
Okay, next we'll go to Louis Martinez with ABC News.
Thank you, General. Going back to the lessons learned from Ramadi, how well did the Iraqi forces do with maintaining their supply lines for what turned out to be a very long operation? And what lessons can be learned for what can be transferred to Mosul, given that the larger scope of that potential operation?
No, that's a very good question. I think the Iraqis did learn a lot of lessons, and I think they've learned the lessons, if you could move from sort of Tikrit onwards and the initial part, and Ramadi, we saw sort of an example of that. The first bit, I think, is I've seen much better cooperation between the Iraqi army, the Iraqi police, and the counter-terrorism service, and actually them sort of ensuring that they can support each other's sustainment pieces. And I have seen them work out how ammunition should flow, and particularly how vehicles can be recovered and replaced back. And that has enabled us to try and better understand what they need more of at time and space. But what we call the burn rate, i.e. the rate at which items are being used, I think that is one of the key lessons that we took out, both for us and the Iraqis. Because as you rightly say, Mosul is different. It is also further away from the main Iraqi logistics base, and therefore they are working pretty hard at trying to understand exactly what they need to pre-position in order to sustain some of those lessons learnt from Ramadi.
If I could follow up on what you're discussing as the burn rate, are you talking about ammunition? Are you talking about equipment that was specifically needed for that operation that they didn't have in larger numbers?
Yeah, I'm talking, you're quite right to describe it as both. So there's the ammunition bit, and the burn rate we use, it's a phrase to describe the average usage rates over a single day, which allows us to sort of map out over that period of time. But the other thing we've noticed is the damage to vehicles or the spare parts that we used. For example, Humvees got with their radiator shot out more than normal, and therefore working out which bits of spares we need to have available in the workshops to put vehicles back into effect sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll go to Corey Dickstein with Stars and Stripes.
Hi, General. Thanks for doing this. I want to go back to, you mentioned the menu of capabilities you guys have given to the Iraqis. I wanted to see, could you give us any insight into what kind of capabilities we're talking about? I think you had offered at one point Apaches before Ramadi. And can you tell us how open the Iraqis have been to such a menu?
I think the menu would, as I mentioned earlier on to one of the earlier questions, we're looking really still continuing within the approach that we've adopted at the moment. The Apaches, which you've talked on before, that's been mentioned by Secretary Carter, and it's been an open discussion. That is part of that sort of package. But the other sort of capabilities very much are within what we have been doing and proven to been doing, as we learnt before. And the real reason for this uplift that I mentioned is, as the Iraqis expand and continue their counteroffensive, both in Anbar and Nineveh, they're simply doing more and they're expanding into that area. So trying to work out exactly how we'll better enable them as they sustain momentum in that counterattack is the piece that we're working at.
Anybody else? Yeah, Richard.
General, can you tell us anything about the situation right now in Makmur, where the Marines set up the fire base? number of reports that the Iraqis had to abandon some positions that they tried to take and then fell back. What's the status up there right now? Are they advancing?
I read, I think, one of those reports a couple of days ago, actually, and it caused us to sort of go back and sort of have a quick look. And I think in many areas like this, as a battle, as you know, comes in ebbs and flows, and it's at the end of the day to see whether you have held land or moved land forward really is the only judgment. And what we've seen over the days since the Iraqis moved out of Makmur forward has been a steady and pretty confident progress. Some areas are harder than others. But over the piece, roughly, they are in line with their objectives that they've set. And there are some areas that are just tougher and take a bit longer, and they have to sort of move a bit more focus effort on. But what I've seen is a pretty confident advance along the line of their objectives over the period of time since they've stepped off.
Quick follow from Lita and then from Louis.
General, a quick follow-up on that. Can you also tell us how much the Marines are doing there as far as fires from their fire base? Is it increasing? Is it steady? And what is the level of attacks they're taking there at the fire base?
I'll work from the back sort of forwards. In terms of attacks on the base, I would say since sadly we lost Staff Sergeant Cardine, have sort of dropped down, because as the Iraqis have moved forward and advanced forward, that clearly has disrupted any of the local attacks. There's still the occasional indirect fire attack, but even that seems to have dropped down from where it was earlier on. It's now more concentrated actually on the Iraqis who have advanced forward of the Peshmerga lines in line with what the objectives we've just described. In terms of what the Marines are therefore doing, there is the occasional piece of self-defense fire responding to those indirect attacks that I've just touched on, but that has dropped down. A lot of their fire missions now are in support of those advancing troops, and is either in support using high explosive or sometimes using illumination rounds at night to help the Iraqi forces during some of the nighttime activity.
And Louis Martinez.
Another follow-up on that, sir. As the Iraqi military moves forward, let's say, does that, I know the artillery is long range, but is there a possibility that this fire base could move forward as well, or that you would need additional artillery further up as the Iraqi military progresses up the line?
You wouldn't be surprised to know that how long it stays there, and as you know, the US Marine guns were put in there to support a particular piece of activity. We'll keep that under review. And at times we will adjust it as required. But where we make that adjustment to, that stuff we simply haven't quite sort of closed with yet. Because, of course, don't forget the artillery is part of our sort of other fires, particularly the air-delivered fires. And it's that combination of coalition fires in support that we sort of try and work through all the time.
And one last quick follow-up from Lucas here.
Just one more follow-up, General. There are some reports that some Iraqi forces have once again retreated. Can you comment on those?
Do you know whereabouts we're talking about?
Heard very general, just as this Mosul advance has gone underway, there's been some reports that some Iraqi forces have retreated, cut and run, and just wanted, for the record, wanted you to talk about those. Are they true? Are they not true?
Yeah, I think I read an article that described exactly that, I think a couple of days ago now, or maybe yesterday. And the simple answer is I go back into battles do ebb and flow. When they come across sometimes they withdraw to reposition and re-attack and to counterattack before it's normal. And what I have seen, as I say, is at the end of each day is a steady incremental increase and advance by the Iraqi forces. So I think what we have seen sort of repositioning, but the advance very much has been continued. And I compare and contrast that, for example, to this time last year, where we probably might have well have seen the Iraqi forces withdraw, What we've seen them over this advance is when they come across data resistance, they reposition, consolidate, and then re-attack. And that's a significant advance as they've got to better understand the enemy that they're dealing with at the moment.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. General Chalmers, thank you very much for your time and coming live to us as you are. We appreciate the information and the update. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you.